Isekai animes are some of the most popular shows nowadays, and yet they invite some of the greatest and controversial discourse amongst the fandom. In this version of the ReZero Report, or should I say the Isekai Report, I'm joined by my friends Matrix AM and Ayvhel as we discuss the current state of Isekai animes. If you do enjoy videos like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and let's jump right into it. Go ahead and introduce yourself, guys.
Hello, I'm Matrix, and my channel is Matrix AM.
Hello there, I'm Ayvhel, and my channel name is Ayvhel. So guys, I think the first thing we should ask is, are isekais overdone by now?
Well, to answer your question, man, I really think they are. I feel like there's a lot of isekai animes out there right now, and it's just so generic, a lot of them, that it just feels like, there's almost too much of it. Like, I wish they were a little bit controlled and more unique, in a sense.
I would slightly disagree with that. I would say, yes, generic isekai are overdone, but I think in general, there are so many unique things that pop up every year that there's still so much to be explored within the genre. I think the problem is that the percentage of isekai in an average season has been getting a lot higher recently. I think last season it was about 20% of the entire shows that were airing during the season were isekai, but this season it's actually a lot smaller, and I think that we should really focus on the shows that stand out rather than just how many there are in general.
I mean, I'm gonna say I'm more on the side of Matrix, but I go even further than that. I like what we get from isekai. I don't have a problem with having a few extra shows every season that I won't care about, since I'm not forced to watch them either way. I just want one thing. It's, if the anime is good, I'm happy about it. And we might complain that we get a lot of bad isekai, but let's compare the amount of good isekai we get compared to, good mecha.
I mean, you're right about that. I feel like, the mecha genre, it was a big boom in the 90s and 80s, and then essentially, every show had some sort of mecha, and now there's essentially, the death of mecha, where, every once in a while we get, that one brilliant mecha show, Darling in the Franxx, which is 14 episodes long, of course,
yes.
And, Dynazenon and Gridman. But I feel like, the isekais now, right? This as a genre as a whole, which accounts for both the good ones and the bad ones. I feel like there's, more, boring ones than there are good ones. The unique ones are just very few and far in between nowadays.
Watch them. You don't have to watch them.
I know, but I'll still complain about it.
Because people still watch them. I think it's one of those complaints where, as long as you complain but you keep watching them, they're gonna keep making them.
So, what are some of your favorite isekais in the last couple of years which have aired?
I guess I'll start with this one. So definitely ReZero. I know we all love it. It really has changed my opinion of isekai in general, because the first season I thought it was kind of generic. It was good, but I would only give it a 7 out of 10, and there were a lot of characters that I really didn't like. For example, I didn't even like Rem. I did like Rem. I didn't like Subaru or Amelia. But in season 2, Amelia and Subaru both got so much incredible development, and the story was so good and so well developed that it completely reversed my opinion, and now it's a 10 out of 10 for me, and some of the characters that I really disliked became my favorites. And then for other shows, I think Konosuba, in terms of comedy, is the top tier comedy isekai, and I think a lot of that is actually due to the voice cast, because it has one of the most stacked casts in all of, not even just isekai, but comedy anime in general, I think. And there are a few other shows recently that I think have been surprisingly good, like Isekai Quartet. That's just been a really interesting experiment in combining a bunch of different worlds into one, and really letting the voice actors flex their talents, because the animation style is so minimal. And then I guess the last show that really impressed me recently would be Sunny Boy from most recent season, because not a typical isekai, because there's a whole class of students that goes through multiple worlds, and it focuses more on like surreal elements and examining individual characters rather than some like strict like railroaded plot, I guess.
I have to agree with that Sony Boy one. I really enjoyed Sony Boy last season, and a few isekai animes that I really loved are not including like the very obvious ones which came out in like around 2016 and earlier, like No Game No Life. I think recently, as everybody in my channel knows, I caught up to ReZero, and my god, ReZero was such a stunning experience for me. And unlike Matrix, I actually really enjoyed season 1, where I feel like Subaru was such a brilliant character to me because of all of his flaws, and the fact that, ReZero took all these, generic isekai tropes in a sense and, broke them down and, gave us such beautiful characters. It was just amazing to see, and I feel like season 2 elevated the characters to an even higher level, even though I feel like the adaptation wasn't as good as it could have been. And after reading a bit of the web novels, I feel like I'm, doubled down on that, where I feel like the adaptation could have been better, but it was still a good adaptation nonetheless. White Fox did an amazing job. And an isekai I don't see people talking about a lot, which I really loved, was Recovery of an MMO Junkie, which I saw, in the past year, I think I saw it, where it was just, it was a sort of reverse isekai where, it took place in our world, but they also went into like a game, and it was just had a lot of the episodes were set in the game itself. But yeah, those two are like my standout isekais I really enjoyed, along with Konosuba, which I really love for the comedic aspect and the voice acting.
I'm not going to stray a lot farther from where you guys have talked around. ReZero, we all love it. I think that we all love Konosuba as well, if I'm not mistaken. The only ones that I would add to that really impacted me, I guess, Mushoku Tensei, which I'm sure Matrix will love once he watches, which I think is just amazing, and is probably the biggest reason why I'm not gonna complain about an isekai being generic anymore, as long as it's good.
Okay, wait 1 sec. You brought up Mushoku Tensei, and I know you're really passionate about this subject. What do you think of, the common saying that Mushoku Tensei is the pioneer of all isekais?
Look, there's a reason behind it. These kinds of things don't pop out of nowhere. If you guys don't know, in Shosetsuka ni Naro, which is Let's Become Novelists, the biggest web novel website in Japan, where basically all of the light novels we are aware of come from. The ones that started as web novels, like ReZero, Konosuba, Shield Hero, all of those. There was one web novel there that was by far more popular than all of them, and it was Mushoku Tensei. By far, it was essentially the most popular web novel ever, if I'm not mistaken. There's a reason why people think that it originated it, but once you actually look at it chronologically, there's a lot of web novels that are very similar in structure, in tropes, in all of those things, just not as good, and so we don't even care about them 2-3 years later. So the way that I would say it is that it's probably the one that, if you're writing a light novel in Japan and it's an isekai, Mushoku is probably the one that your editor will point to and tell you, do something like that. It's the reference point, but it's not the first. I think that's the distinction that sometimes it's hard to make, because we tend to conflate who did it first and who did it better.
I really think Mushoku Tensei, even if it is or it isn't, which I'm pretty sure it's not the first, said pioneer of like isekai tropes and all, I think that Mushoku Tensei does do it much better than a lot of other isekais, and that's a reason why it's gaining such a hype and popularity.
And it's unbelievably important for the history of isekai. There's a difference between me saying this and trying to be contrarian. Oh, it doesn't matter, it's just another one. No, it's incredibly important, it's just for a different reason.
I mean, I feel like there's like a few like, you know, pinnacle isekais which are really important for like the growth of the series, right? Like Devil is a Part-Timer, for example, for that reverse isekai thing. That was such a, you know, amazing isekai when it came out, and it came out a long time ago, contrary to popular belief, because, you know, some people think it was fairly recent, but it's not.
Yeah.
And, you know,
and you even have
go on.
stuff emulating that recently, like we had The Great Jahi Will Not Be Defeated that got released recently, and that's a very similar thing with, you know, like a Demon Lord's assistant coming to our world from another world.
Yeah, I really like, you know, unique concepts in isekai, and when a unique concept is done well, I feel like it's, you know, it has potential to go there, but I don't like it when isekais, you know, have that general sort of, you know, plot line where, oh, man gets hit by, or man or woman gets hit by a truck, let's go to another world, let's defeat Demon King, and everything is good, right? And the magic system is literally the same everywhere. Like, if a series is going to do that, I would want it to be, you know, unique and have, like, you know, that certain aspect going for it, which, you know, elevates it and separates it from the other stuff. Like, for example, Konosuba, it is a similar concept, but it's a parody. You know, it takes fun at some of these things, and, you know, as Matrix mentioned before, the voice acting and, you know, the character chemistry between all of the you know, voice actors voicing the characters, you can feel like these guys are having fun, and that's what makes Konosuba as good as it was, for me at least. I just don't want, you know, the general tropes, you know, trying to get subverted through the means of, you know, something like tacky, like, you know that Mother Isekai we recently had. That was one of the most atrocious things I've ever watched.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. It is important to try and stand out, but you don't have to stand
Mother?
out. Yeah, that one was a bit off, and it's not even the only one where it's an isekai with a mom. I know there's others like that. I think
it feels like it's grabbing at straws which aren't there.
The biggest issue is not a question of if it's different or not, is more if it was different and made to be different. That's also meaningless. You know, if you're doing something just for the sake of it being different, I don't think it's gonna have much. This is gonna sound corny, but a soul, I guess. It's gonna look soulless, like it's just trying to catch on the niche.
I feel like soul in an anime is quite important, and that's I know it sounds corny as well, but, you know, it's kind of the reason why people love Kyo Ani shows, right? It's like they have this sort of soul and heart in them.
Well, that as long as they are that, as well as they are really fucking good.
Yeah, that too. And, you know, in the end, it doesn't matter what a show is, as long as it has good writing going for it. People are going to, you know, watch it and like it. And if it has trash writing and, you know, trying to, you know, grab at straws which aren't there, people won't like it. That's just how things work. But
could I just jump in with one last thing on that? So I also think that whenever we do have a concept that's good and unique, it seems like a bunch of other people instantly hop on that and try to do it themselves, and it doesn't work as well the second time. Like, for example, you know, somebody does a restaurant isekai, and then 5 other people do a restaurant isekai, or somebody does a villainous isekai, and then 5 other people do a villainous isekai. Like, it's really cool the first time around, but then, you know, not everybody's able to put as good of a spin on it.
yeah, and, you know, that's why I think, like, you know, the need to be, you know, somewhat unique and stuff is quite important. But even if you're not unique, you know, we see shonen succeeding for this reason. A lot of the shonens have, you know, similar tropes, right? But the reason why they're successful so often is because sometimes they just nail the generic stuff super well. And the same thing goes for romance animes, I feel like. You know, there are some romance animes which literally do the same thing as romance anime Y and X. Like, they're both the same. But, you know, one of them just, you know, it's just a more tightly written story, which makes it, you know, a fun watch or a fun read. But, you know, going to my next point, do you think nowadays isekais are loved or hated? And if you think of either way, why do you think it's as such? Why do you think they're loved or hated?
Do you want to go first, Matrix?
Sure. Think the answer is probably both. There are people who are crazy into isekai and, you know, all they'll ever watch is isekai. but then there are people who, maybe watched one isekai or haven't even watched any isekai, and they just hate the genre as a whole, and, they won't ever give it a chance. I think the vast majority of people are like us in that they like some isekai shows and they think other isekai shows are trash. And I think probably the percentage of what's good and what's trash differs from person to person, but I'd say, like, the typical anime watcher probably has, like, a more balanced view on this question.
Some people are gonna hate it just to hate it, some people are gonna love it just to love it, and most people are gonna be in between, where they like the ones that they like, but at the same time, that doesn't mean they're gonna glorify the ones they don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to, not just label everything as trash, of course, but I feel like the general line is far higher in order to make that good isekai, right? We just see, like, few and far between come which truly blow people's minds away. And, for me, I will say it, I will admit it, I was the isekai hater, right? Before, ReZero really converted me. But that's just, my personal experience with it. But I don't think people should, like, just blindly hate on them or blindly love them in any sense. I wish there was, like, more of a nuance to them. Which, I mean, I think people are, going towards that, where there's a nuanced discussion on each and every isekai.
And
but
then
one
there are
common
just shows that people love to hate, like Sword Art Online.
Okay, yeah, a good point. Let's talk about Sword Art Online, right? I liked Sword Art Online's first season, right? And then I admit it fell off. But then I watched Alicization, right? And Alicization is decent. I don't know why people still hate on Sword Art Online, because Alicization is genuinely a good show. Like, I recommend people watch it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've always enjoyed Sword Art Online despite all the hate it receives online. And, of course, it's not a masterpiece. It's not an amazingly written show consistently. But parts of the first season and Alicization, and I think even to some degree the movie, have a lot of good qualities. And you have to remember that the author wrote the story initially for a contest when he had very little writing experience, and it got popular and it got made into a show before he really had the chance to revise it into something that was a lot better. And he originally didn't even want the story to go beyond Aincrad, but then once it became a franchise, then he had to keep extending it. And I think he's really shown a vast amount of improvement. Like, the writing in Alicization is just so much better than the rest of the series. And it also, like, toward the end, kind of fell back to some of the same problems that he has with, kind of undervaluing the female characters in the show and, making some things not explained enough. But also, that's partially on the studio too, because there's a lot of stuff from the light novels that they're not able to convey about how the world works and how things like incarnation works. So a lot of the things that people say are like, oh, that's BS, that's overpowered, would be slightly less so if they knew the reasons why it was happening.
Alright, for me, right, I really liked SAO's Alicization storyline. And, it also is important that writers grow and improve over time. People should realize that, right? And X thing, if it's bad at one point, it doesn't mean it doesn't have a chance to improve, right, if you give it time. But that you mentioned a very good point about, the adaptations, right? What are your thoughts on adapting isekai from, a web novel to a light novel or a manga or, an anime adaptation? Because I feel like a lot of people complain that the anime adaptations of isekais are not well done because they skip out on a lot of things.
I think that's bound to happen, not only with isekai adaptations, but with all sorts of adaptations. First of all, there's the question of the medium. There's certain things you can do in writing you just can't do through animation. And then there's the second point, which is most light novels heavily rely on narration, of the thoughts, like the inner monologue of the main character. They heavily rely on it, but that's the kind of thing that most people do not like in anime format. So it's hard to find a balance. I think there's different solutions to it. ReZero just went with trying to explain things through visual metaphors and really show how Subaru is feeling through these exaggerated expressions of how much he is suffering. A lot of them have even become memes by this point. And then there's the way that Mushoku did, where they kept the inner dialogue. They kept it all. They give you the thought process of Rudius. So I don't think there's a proper way to adapt things perfectly when they're light novel. Manga, it's easier, but light novel is very hard to adapt.
I think it's kind of inevitable that you have to change some things when you're adapting something into another medium, especially when it comes to characters' thoughts. There's an interesting manga that I've been into recently called Oshi no Ko, which is by the author of Kaguya-sama, and basically they have an arc about adaptation. It's about all forms of Japanese media, and in a chapter there's a manga author who's having her manga adapted into a stage play, and when she sees the script and how it's laid out, she's really unhappy with it because it's laid out drastically different than the way her manga is. But then when she goes and actually sees a stage play, she realizes that if they adapted it the way she wanted to, then it would be a terrible experience as a stage play. So I think similarly, when you're adapting a light novel, if you did everything exactly the way the book does it, I think it would, in a lot of cases, be a poorer anime experience. So you have to give the anime team some freedom to change things in order to make it a better anime experience. And I think that's also why it's good to both watch an anime and eventually look at the source material if you can.
I also think it's important to bring up that an anime adaptation brings a lot of things with it that, a light novel or a manga just can't. Firstly, an animated medium, which is very important. And the second thing is music. And people clown on me a lot for, saying the music in ReZero is an 8 out of 10. But, I really enjoyed the soundtrack. Like, I'm not saying it's garbage. I'm just saying, I really enjoyed it. It was in season 2, it was even better in my opinion. And you don't get that stuff with light novels where, you won't have that immersive experience. And an animation studio, has to be bound to the constraints of whatever the episode is, right? The episode length is. They have so many other, constraints they have to abide by. So they can't include everything that a light novel or a web novel has. So I encourage, readers to just go check out the other medium and experience that for themselves, right?
Right.
What do you guys think is the future of Isekai?
I think the future of Isekai is very, very bright in the sense where I don't think the storm is going to end anytime soon of Isekai animes constantly coming out. And with the sheer quantity coming out, there's bound to be, a few Isekais that everybody's gonna like. Like ReZero, like Mushoku Tensei, like No Game No Life, and etc, etc. So I don't think the wave is ending anytime soon, and as long as people are, willing to consume them, even the trash isekais are gonna come out.
Yeah, I think we're going to keep seeing an increasing percentage of shows being isekai for the time being, and I think it'll be like it is now, where most of them don't really stand out, but every couple of years we're gonna get a really good show that kind of reinvents the genre, and then we're gonna see a lot of other shows trying to copycat that and probably be less successful until the next big show comes out, and then the process will repeat. I mean, I don't think isekai will necessarily be the most popular genre forever, but I do think it's got at least a couple more years in it.
I mean, I think it's gonna transition into something else, because when you think about it, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I remember the mecha craze shifting into a mecha school craze for a little bit, then into a fantasy school thing, where it was like magic schools were everywhere, harem magic schools, and then that transitioned into isekai, so I think that isekai is gonna fade. I just think it's gonna be replaced by something else that we will still complain about, because most of them will be generic, most of them will be, kind of bland. I think that shift is gonna be into more traditional fantasy. I think we're gonna see a lower amount of isekai and slightly more fantasy. It's gonna be a transition. I don't think it's like next season, no more isekai, right? I just think that it's probably gonna fade sooner or later. Now with Mushoku being adapted, most of the ones that got really big as light novels early on have had adaptations. So I don't know. I don't think there's gonna be fuel in this tank forever, and I think it's starting to run out.
I think that's a good point, actually, because it seems like there are quite a few shows that are isekai shows that don't actually make that isekai process very central to their premise, or
and they don't need to be. I don't know if I think you watched it, like Shihate no Paladin.
I've started it. Yeah, that's this season.
Did you watch more than the 5 minutes you for your video?
Just the first episode so far.
Oh, because like at the end of the first episode you discover it's an isekai, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that show needed to be an isekai.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So far.
And another example is My Next Life as a Villainess. So basically, in the first season, she ended up solving all the problems that required any reliance on her knowledge from the other world, which is the Otome game that she was playing. So in the second season, even though she's still a character who was isekai'd, the second season's pretty much just a generic fantasy show and fantasy romance comedy. But there really isn't much mention of her being from another world except for a few like visual gags and things like that.
I feel like the reason that people like studios include that thing is just to have like that another element of a character in order to humanize them in like another world, right? Where they can have like those reaction shots of like, oh, it's just so different from my world.
That is easy to exchange for like a child that was raised, like the child was raised, let's say in the mountains, right? And they first see what the real world is like. Even something that's not at all like Isekai, which is Mashle, a manga that is serializing in Shonen Jump right now. If I'm not mistaken, it's Shonen Jump. I might be wrong.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it is. It is.
It is serializing there. Mash never knew about the magic world, but he didn't need to come from our world. He was just born in the mountains and raised there.
Yeah, I mean that's completely fine, I think. And I instead I want it to be that way, like more so, because I feel like like just adding that they're from another world for the sake of it, because lessens the narrative and like the like the substance of the show. But if it's just a general fantasy, I really welcome that. I in fact enjoy them a lot more, because I don't know why I enjoy it if it's just a fantasy rather than them going into it. But I feel like if it's just a fantasy, I would like it more. Not sure why it's that way, but it is.
There can still be problems though with the introduction of stuff about the world, because if you don't have a character being isekai'd and having stuff explained to them, then a lot of fantasy shows either number one have like narration at the beginning that just stuffs a bunch of information down your throat, which I don't like, or number two, they have people not explaining stuff to each other but stating the obvious in dialogue, like, oh, today is 18 years after we took you in after your parents were killed by those bandits, like stuff that nobody would ever say in actual conversation.
There's a lack of subtlety.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's examples of that. Like I know that Ro is watching OUSAMA King, something like that. No,
You mean
wait.
Oh my
Osama
god.
Osama
ranking.
ranking. Oh my god.
Yeah, Osama game.
Such
you
a
do
good
not
show.
want.
King. I literally just said King, but yeah. Osama ranking. It's a fantasy, and so far the first episode was really engaging, and they didn't explain anything to us. Anything at all.
Yeah, you literally don't know why the kid is that way, or just anything in general. Like, there wasn't really that much into like world building as well. It was just such a good character driven show. Oh my god, I love Osama ranking so much. But coming back to the point, you guys, I agree with you guys, and like I feel like the future of isekai is bright. There will be a flow of them, but I think it'll eventually face that mecha crisis where it's gonna slowly transition into something else. And I think that's just that's just the nature of media in general. There's all these transitions of it, and it has to adapt to time. And eventually, when we get bored of isekais, the consumers are gonna demand it, and the suppliers will have to supply it. And that's how economic works. I learned that from the economic
Stonks.
isekai.
Do any of you have an idea for what's gonna be like the next big isekai? Or isekai adjacent show?
I don't know. I don't know what these isekai creators are thinking, right? Like, I never expected a mother isekai to be a thing, and it's a thing. Like, I don't know what they're gonna come up with.
Honestly, I think that Sword Art Online Progressive could be very big.
Yeah,
yeah.
I think so too, because it's hopefully in the visual form going to fix a lot of the flaws that the first season had, because it's focusing on Asuna, it's actually going floor by floor instead of rushing things, and Ayvhel and I both agree that Asuna is a better protagonist than Kirito, because it's focusing less on the overpowered stuff and just having him as more of a impressive side character. Kind of similar to the way that in ReZero, Subaru as the protagonist isn't overpowered, but he has a lot of friends that are overpowered, but they don't take away from the show because their impact is more limited.
Yeah,
So you're telling me Kirito gets the blessing of Reinhardt?
Yeah, man, that's the thing. Like, I think Kirito works a lot better as the badass love interest that appears every other episode. I mean, Reinhardt and Julius, neither of them is a love interest, but I've never heard a complaint about them being overpowered because the story isn't around them. And I think at the same time it gives a goal to Asuna, because in the original show, Asuna and Kirito had this rivalry going. So now him being overpowered is actually plays to a strength of the show, which is Asuna trying to reach that same level.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think pulling back from Kirito just will improve the writing in general, because the best parts for me of all of Sword Art Online are the parts in Alicization when Kirito isn't a big force in the story. And that's all I'll say, because I don't want to put any spoilers for anyone who hasn't watched it, but
I'd say that I agree, but I would just point out a different part, which is my favorite by far of Sword Art Online. And I think by far the best is Mother's Rosario, which focuses on Asuna and I don't remember the name of the girl with black hair. Yeah, Yuki.
Yeah, I like more of a focus on Asuna. I just feel she's just far, compelling character to follow. And, like what Ayvhel mentioned about Asuna trying to catch up to Kirito, that will be such a compelling, plot line. And if SAO has a redemption arc for the anime community, that'll be one of the funnest things to see. That'll be beautiful.
Yeah, and then we'll probably see people saying, "Oh, I loved it all along," even if they, a couple years earlier were writing hate
Matrix
comments
have
for
proof that we love it.
Yeah.
We have proof, documented proof.
And I think this is a good time to end our little, podcast on the current state of isekai anime. And if you guys did enjoy this, be sure to check out these two, who are the reason why this, thing occurred in the first place. That's literally it. And Matrix is amazing VTuber. Follow him too.
And he's almost at 1K. Please go sub to him. He really needs to start making that bread.
Yeah.
And sub to Golden Road, because he deserves a lot more subscribers.
Exactly, because he's a cute one.
Exactly. Alright guys, thanks for coming on. I hope you guys have a great day and peace.